Hey, it's Claire, and I'm going to be talking about literary terms within the category of comparison. I'm going to focus on three types of comparison: metaphors, similes, and personification. I'm going to start with metaphors. The English word metaphor comes directly from the Latin or Greek word metaphora, which means to transfer. This makes sense because a metaphor is essentially a transfer of one idea or concept onto another. In other words, it is a figure of speech which makes a comparison between two things or objects that have some characteristic in common between them. The author claims that one thing actually is something else because of this common characteristic. Many good examples of metaphors can be found in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. During Act 3, Scene 3, Romeo says that heaven is here, where Juliet lives. This is a metaphor because he is saying that heaven actually exists in the place where Juliet lives, also implying that Juliet is actually an angel. Because neither of these claims are true and are only being used to highlight a point about Juliet, the statement is a metaphor. Metaphors can be used for a variety of reasons. Sometimes an idea is too complex to be thoroughly explained without the use of a metaphor. Or, as with Romeo and Juliet, the idea isn't too complex, but describing the concept in basic terms isn't doing the idea justice, such as saying someone's eyes are beautiful versus saying someone's eyes are the stars or the ocean. Another reason to use metaphors is that they allow the reader to be able to relate to the message of the piece more when the author takes the audience into consideration. A third reason to use metaphors is that they can add more interest into a piece of writing and can grab an audience's attention more easily. One last reason is that metaphors are simply nice to read. They can add poetic details to an otherwise dull piece of writing and make a boring article more fun to read. Now we're going to move on to similes. A simile is related to a metaphor. However, with a simile, the author is claiming that something is similar to another thing with the help of words such as like or as. One example of simile can be found in William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury. He says that yellow butterflies flickered along the shade like flecks of sun. By describing the butterflies as sunlight, the picture created in the reader's mind is more majestic and beautiful. Another example can be found in J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan when Wendy's mind is being described. He says that her romantic mind was like the tiny boxes, one within the other. This example is interesting because it shows a simile being used to describe something essentially indescribable by giving the reader a completely different picture. The uses of similes are very similar to those of a metaphor. However, a simile is also oftentimes used to add playfulness to a piece, such as in children's books, which is done less often with metaphors. The last literary device is personification. Personification is when an object, idea, or animal is given a human quality. In other words, it is when anything non-human is described in a way that makes it appear human. One example is the poem "The Skies Can't Keep Their Secret" by Emily Dickenson. In the poem, she says, "The skies can't keep their secret, they tell it to the hills just tell the orchards, and they the daffodils." Emily Dickenson often describes things in nature as human beings because it allows her readers to feel more connected to the natural world. There are multiple different reasons to use personification in literature. As with simile and metaphor, personification can be used to add interest or whimsy to a piece, such as saying the flowers were being blown versus the flowers danced in the breeze. Personification is also used in order to convey emotions of things that aren't necessarily capable of emotions. If an author said, "The table sighed under the weight of all the papers," it's as if the table feels stressed or overwhelmed like a human being, which allows people to relate to an animal or object when they normally wouldn't be able to. The last reason to use personification is to add more vivid description. When setting up a scene, an author could simply say it was stormy outside. However, if they say that the rain was pounding on the roof while thunder clapped in the sky, then the reader can get a clearer picture of what is happening. Now I'm going to give you some ways to remember these literary devices. With a metaphor, all you need to remember is the phrase "me too." Because the word metaphor has the letters M-E-T in it, just like the phrase "me too," you can remember that when something states what it is, the person being compared would say "me too," because the writer is claiming that they actually are that other thing. With a simile, a good way to remember it is to remember that it sounds like the word similar. This helps because the two things you are comparing are like each other, meaning they are similar, but not the same as with metaphor. As for personification, you are making an object or idea like a person, which is in the word personification. In other words, you are personifying it, or giving it a persona, which can help you remember the term. To sum it all up, metaphors, similes, and personification are all methods of describing things in ways they wouldn't normally be described through the use of comparison.